Gosh.
And while I have y'all here, we actually have a PIO that's starting tomorrow, and we'll be putting together a meeting, a networking meet and greet, kind of where we were a year ago as a media and a team. We'll get City Comms in on that one as well, so she can meet all of y'all and you know who she is, and we can work well as partners. What's her name? Hannah?
Yeah, and I think Hannah was PIO up in D.C., right, most recently?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we're excited to have her.
All right, Chief.
All right, thank you. Hey, guys, I don't have anything prepared for you. You know, it's great to be here today. I'm coming up on my 1-year mark as Chief of Police here in Roanoke, Virginia, so it's been a pretty interesting year. It's been a good year, I think, in a lot of ways, and I've really learned a lot about our police department and our city. And I just kind of wanted to make myself available to the group, and then I'll do some one-on-ones. And so this is kind of driven by you. So please be kind. Henry, that goes for you as well, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Share some of your achievements or accomplishments in the past year.
Well, you know, I don't want to say it's just me. I don't want to do that, but I think we, as a community, and we as a department, have, knock on wood, have had a pretty good year. You know, I guess although any loss of life or any time somebody's injured in our community, it's a great tragedy. You probably heard me say that before, but you know, when you look at our gun violence numbers now versus a year ago, you know, we had a really bad year in the city of Roanoke with lives lost to gun violence last year. And, you know, that's been reduced, or that is down by about 65%, all right, when it comes to those lives actually killed, homicides, gun-related homicides, and about 55% as far as non-fatal shootings. So when I look at statistics, you know, I really don't take a deep dive until the end of the year, but, you know, we're constantly looking at where crime happens in our community. And I think when we're looking at our gun violence and we're seeing our decrease in gun violence, that's attributable to a couple things, right? So good policing absolutely is a big part of that. A community coming together is another part of that. Other things that we had in place that I think are starting to really show, you know, the benefits, things like the Gun Violence Prevention Commission, things that we've been building out for a number of years here in Roanoke. I think all those things are coming together. So we are very proud of that. And the other thing, you know, I think when we look internally at us as an organization with the Roanoke Police Department, you know, I'm kind of a one-trick pony in a way. You know, I was in Richmond for 20 years, Danville for a number of years, and now here. One of the things that always drives me is how do we build a model that reduces crime? But coming into Roanoke a year ago, we had a whole lot more to worry about than just reducing crime. We had a department that was really kind of struggling with some communication issues, some trust issues. You know, we had a deputy chief and a captain that had left the department kind of under a cloud of scrutiny, and we were able to kind of work together and build a team that I believe certainly trusts each other more, and I think communicates well, because, you know, your team has to be high functioning if you want to have an impact like what we're seeing in our community.
So gun-related homicides are down 65%, you said?
So gun-related homicides down about 65%. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but those are the numbers I reported out on at the Operation Ceasefire press conference about 10 days ago. Mm-hmm.
And that's a significant reduction.
It is,
in
yeah.
1 year. Can
Yeah.
you share your thoughts on that success and also why you think that's happening?
So the thoughts on those success. So I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in chance, right? I think it's a community coming together first and foremost. Big chunk of that's good policing. We've also done some things here that we weren't doing before. You know, when we look at how we respond to not just our homicides, but our non-fatal shootings. I mean, we roll a team out now for non-fatal shootings, all right? Sometimes I would have a detective before, a single detective. Now we have a team of detectives and officers that go out there. All right, it's very person-based, very place-based. We're much more focused on where crime is happening in our community. In Roanoke, has used data for years, right? Relatively sophisticated department, but we can always get better. And I think we've gotten better at how we're using that data. I know we've gotten better. Our iStar team is starting to advance some different things. We went to a stratified policing model here about 3-4 months ago, right, where we actually started doing the stratified model of accountability, something that certainly seemed to work for me down in Danville, Virginia, something we're doing here now. About a month ago, as a continuation of the stratified model, we now have lieutenants that are assigned to geographic areas. I'm a huge believer in that, right? So before, you had shift lieutenants, and a lot of your crime information, your citizen, issues would go directly to the chief or to the officer, on the street. But mid-level management really wasn't tied in to what was going on in with some of the community problems. Now that we have lieutenants that are assigned to zones, and Roanoke is divided into 4 zones, and has been for a long time. So the division was already there. But now that we have that, we have a mid-level manager, and she or he will be much more responsive to community needs. And I think if you're responsive to community needs on the front end, that can absolutely has a positive impact on crime, and especially violent crime, right? Sometimes you can get out of front of things before it rolls into an actual incident.
A lot of our viewers still kind of know you for Danville. Is there any challenge that Roanoke presents that's unique from your
Yeah, good question. In Danville, great community, and Roanoke also a great community. Roanoke is bigger. It's a little bit more complex. We have a much more defined downtown than what we had in Danville. So in addition to, our levels of challenges of gun violence that we've been talking about, is we have some downtown challenges that I didn't see as much or experience as much in Danville. We have challenges of making sure that our unhoused are treated fairly, that our businesses are served when it comes to, dealing with some of the issues with the unhoused in our community. Those are complaints that we hear a lot, and we have to make sure that we're, protecting the constitutional rights of those folks that are downtown, as well as making sure that our businesses feel safe and their customers feel safe, and the tourists to our cities, to our city here, that they feel good about coming to downtown Roanoke. So there's some complexities here, right, that I didn't have in Danville. Danville's a little bit more cut and dry. We had some pockets of violence, and we would develop some models to respond to that, and I think we did a real good job with that. We had a history there of mistrust with the police when I first got there, so we built some really strong community engagement models that worked for us, right? Things like our youth academy, things like incarceration doesn't define us, homelessness doesn't define us, to really help underserved populations there. Roanoke's a little bit more fast moving, takes us a little bit longer to build some of those models out, but the positive is we already have a lot of resources in play here that we didn't have in Danville. So really here, it's not about creating as much and building as much, it's about tapping into those existing resources and making sure those are connected to those same underserved populations many times.
What have been some of the biggest challenges for you in this past year, and then looking ahead to the future?
Well, I think some of the biggest challenges is just kind of getting accepted by the organization, by the community, right? Sometimes as a new leader coming in, and I've done this for a while now, and I'm not trying to brag about this, but it never gets easy, because you so often come in with preconceived notions, right? You have a level of bias towards the organization sometimes, like, all right, I'm going to do A, B, and C, it's going to work. Well, sometimes it doesn't work, right? Sometimes it's like, all right, well, this is Roanoke, not Danville. This is not a Richmond. This is we have our own culture here. We have our own flavor. The city has its own flavor. And sometimes you have to adjust your communication style, your leadership style. There's certain absolutes that I always believe in. I always believe in good communication is key to moving an organization forward. I always believe if you want to reduce crime or make a community better, you better have an accountability model, okay? At the end of the day, I love police officers. I've been a police officer for a long time, but a lot of times police officers kind of want to do what they want to do. And for us to really come together as a department, as a community, we have to have a level of focus, and with that focus comes a level of accountability. So, building out those accountability models isn't always easy, right? Especially if it didn't exist to the level that I kind of expect and want my department to have. Sometimes there's growing pains. But I know we're through those growing pains, and I feel like our 2024 has been really solid, really strong, and I think our 2025 is going to be even better. I feel like we're going to continue to build out on a community engagement model that's getting better day after day. And I think our stratified policing, or what we call neighborhood-oriented policing model, that's tying our officers and supervisors to geographic areas, is really going to start paying dividends for us. And we're already seeing that. We're already seeing folks that had felt that they didn't have as much of a voice before, that they would call, and if they didn't get an answer at the police records or the police chief's office, maybe their concerns could fall through the cracks. And now I have dedicated police managers, police leaders that are following up on those concerns. So we feel good about that.
Can you provide any more specifics about the growing pains you cited in terms of changes to the department?
Well, Henry, of course you would ask me that. So I don't think there was anything bad with that, but for both of us, we're kind of getting used to each other, right? It's the department that's getting used to the chief, and the chief that's getting used to the department. And I am certainly much different than previous chiefs, and I think that kind of works both ways. I have high expectations, and the department has high expectations of me. So once we kind of figure out who we are, meet in the middle, I think that we've kind of worked through that. All right. I found a department that was hungry for leadership. All right. I found a department that really wanted to be accountable and that was really ready just to be cut loose as long as we gave them some direction and accountability. So whatever growing pains we experienced, we were able to work through them quickly. I was able to hire some staff and promote some staff. We were able to bring in Deputy Chief Mike Crawley, who's in the back of the room there. Mike's a retired Salem chief with a long history, deep roots in the Roanoke community. So Mike kind of helps me maneuver some of those things as we move a culture forward. Policing is different, and there are higher expectations on policing than there has ever been before, and it should be. And, this is now my fourth department, and every department is different, and every department has some level of growing pains, right? Came from a large department, about 1,000 folks in the Richmond Police Department, there for 20 years, the D.C. area for a couple years, my first chief's job, Danville, and now here. Every department has its own flavor. We kind of have to get used to each other. My constants are this: I expect the best out of police officers. I expect them always to treat people with dignity and respect, which I absolutely have found here, and I expect them to hold me and me to hold them accountable, because it's not just about what we want to do, right? It's about what the community needs us to do. And I think that sometimes organizations, even good police organizations, they become very inward focused, right? So they're worried about kind of what their members want, and that's important, right? We should be able to communicate with each other. We should be able to grow. We should be able to achieve together. But a lot of times, my priority many times is, what does the community need us to be, right? That's even more important. We're as a police, I think we're bigger than just what we are as an organization. We have nationwide, international implications to almost everything we do. Look what happens with a bad police use of force, right? We saw in 2020 what could happen with the murder of George Floyd. That resonates throughout the world. So I feel like we have an obligation to make sure we're providing the best service we can. And sometimes we have to push to get there, right? Sometimes I have to push through any barriers that we have inside or outside to get us to where we need to be.
I was going to say, can you speak a little bit more to just coming in and creating that trust with the community and also collaborating with the community?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's simple. Well, it's never simple, but I think there's some foundational things that I really believe that work. Whether when it's with the community, something as simple as a community walk, getting out in a neighborhood and knocking on doors and talking to people and being accessible, I think that works. And you'll find that that's one of the foundational things that I take with me kind of wherever I go, is let's just get out and talk to folks. And when I went to Danville, not to kind of look in the rearview mirror, but we didn't have a strong community policing model. Roanoke was much stronger when I got here, but the community policing model was almost non-existent there. So the community walk really became a way for them to, not only for the community to get used to the police officers, but for the police officers, sadly, to get used to the community. So going out there and connecting and breaking down barriers, having a mutual respect, right, for each other, I think that's huge. And, really, you kind of do the same thing inside the organization as you do outside the organization, right? So if you do a community walk, community forum, something that's worked well for us here in Roanoke, where when we first started doing these, and they were doing them even before I walked in the door last year, you would have upwards of 100 residents that were coming together to share concerns and challenges they were experiencing. And sometimes if the police are just there to listen, I think that's a big thing. And if you take that same model, community walk, community forum, and you put it within the organization, right? People want to be heard. People want to feel like they have a voice in the progress, in the forward momentum of the agency. They want to have a seat at the table when it comes to planning. And many times you can give them that. Just because I'm the chief doesn't mean I can't get some really great ideas, and I have, from officers, right? They want to have a voice, especially, a newer generation. Folks want to be heard. Walk around the halls, connect with people, get to know folks, know their name. All these are things that wherever you go, whether it's Richmond, Roanoke, Danville, it doesn't matter. Those are constants that need to go with you.
Can you talk about maybe what hasn't worked, or if there are areas when it comes to community safety that are struggling, or the numbers have gotten worse?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything that I won't say hasn't worked, right? I always have a plan. I've seen what works, right? I've done this for a while. I've seen what works. There are some things that will work better in one community versus another community. Does that make sense? There are some communities that, okay, well, I really don't like the police department doing that. Even something like the community walk, you'll find other agencies, other places that have done that. And believe it or not, some folks actually recoil from it. Well, I don't want the police knocking on my door, right? So I haven't seen anything that we've done here that I've been like, oh my God, that was a mistake. I haven't seen that. I think that transparency and accountability matter. And I think once you establish your baseline as a department of being transparent and accountable, you don't step back, right? So there's some things that I think, because I try to be self-aware. We're probably never as self-aware as we want to be. But sometimes I'm highly critical of things we've done, right? And I was like, okay, we should have gotten that information out faster. Or maybe instead of concentrating on speed so much, let's tweak that a little bit to make sure the right information's getting out there. So I think when it comes to information flow, especially with media partners, sometimes you can step back and reevaluate that a little bit as well. But as far as actual policing philosophies on what's working, the things we're doing, once again, responding to initial incidents with enough resources, making sure we're effectively using ballistics imaging, like ballistics IQ and NIBIN at the scene of a shooting, whether it's a homicide or a non-fatal. Those are things that work, right? Those are standards in the industry that we weren't doing here that we needed to do, and now that we're doing them, those are keepers. They never go away, right? As long as I'm chief, we're having success with that, and we keep that moving forward. Community engagement. A lot of times people, and even when I was the chief in Danville, a lot of times they would be like, oh, Chief Booth, he's only worried about community engagement and getting out and shaking hands and walking the neighborhoods. Why is he doing those community walks? Make no mistake. We're doing real police work in conjunction with community engagement. And I always say that. Real police work does entail locking up violent offenders. And we want to make sure that we are focused on violent offenders, those who would do harm in our community, all right, and those places that generate an inordinate number of incidents, right? Where is crime happening in our community? The nature of crime usually is not random in a community, all right? Small street segments, small areas will produce the majority of incidents, right? Many times the violent incidents come from certain areas of our community. And we need to focus on those areas, but we need to be careful, because this is one of the things that I have seen, and maybe not in a Roanoke or not in a Danville, but I have seen that when my time coming up in Richmond, that we have to be careful that we don't over-police communities, that we don't go in there, and if we have a shooting, we have a violent incident, what I can't have happen is that we are over-focusing on those areas to the detriment of the people that actually live and thrive in those areas. Does that make sense? We have to make sure that dignity and respect is shared by all, And, that can be somewhat complex, right? But we need to make sure we're very violent offender focused, and folks don't get caught up in that. And you saw that a whole lot in the 90s. Once again, I'm dating myself, but I've been around for a while when open air drug markets were a thing, certainly in cities like Roanoke, and especially in cities like Richmond, and we would over police those areas just to make a drug arrest or two. We got to be smarter than that. We have to be much more strategic when it comes to policing now, more so than ever.
Can you talk a little bit about your plans for the future and looking ahead?
Yeah. So, we're going to continue to do with what works, right? We focus on violent offenders. We focus on those places that are producing the most number of criminal incidents. Make sure that we're not over-policing, but staying very focused on that. We're going to build accountability models, right? Continue to build on that from me, the chief, all the way down to that line level officer and detective. Everybody should be responsible for where crime is happening in our community. Something that we've started working on earlier this year that's also very close to my heart, you don't hear me talking about it a lot, is de-escalation models, right? Something, we did this in Danville in 2019. We were the first agency in Virginia to do the de-escalation model that's kind of signed off on by the Police Executive Research Forum. And, the use of force is a constant with what we do as law enforcement, as police. But sometimes we need to take a breath, and sometimes we need to step back and let the situation de-escalate a little bit. So ICAT is our de-escalation model that we're currently training all of our officers in. So as we move into 2025, I anticipate all our officers will be trained in that. We're looking to expand our TASER, our TASER program, which right now is somewhat limited for a department our size. All right, so we're going to move forward and expand our TASER program. We want to expand our take-home car program to make sure our officers have more access to take-home cars, so we're more competitive. In an area that right now we've kind of gotten flat in, full disclosure. We do have more officers than we had last year, but we still have retirements. We still have folks that are moving on to other things. Not as many people want to be police officers now as they used to. When I came on in the 90s, seems like everybody wanted the job of being a police officer. Not so much now. So how do we build a brand here in the city of Roanoke, right, that makes people really want to be a Roanoke police officer? I felt like when I was in Danville as a chief, I felt like that department had done a really great job connecting with its community and building out a brand that folks from that community wanted to be a part of. We're starting to see that somewhat now, but we're far from perfect. So I want us to make sure we're building a brand that resonates with our community. So I have Roanokers that want to be police officers, all right? I'm not saying we don't have great officers from all over the United States here, all over the world, but I want some Roanokers here that are really impacting their community. So we're going to build out on that brand.
A few weeks ago, the city said there were 42 sworn officer vacancies.
Yeah.
I know the former city manager, maybe that report about the department sort of gave this indication that there could be this post-pandemic, sort of like a permanent, if you have to do more with fewer officers, do you think that's going to be what the department?
Gosh, Henry, that's a really thoughtful question. It is a good question. And I'll tell you the same thing that I kind of tell everybody. I think there is a new normal in policing. All right. I do think that sometimes people operate under the old normal, where if you had vacancies, you could get those vacancies filled. And like I said a question ago, the appetite to be police officers isn't as strong as it used to be. I'm very thankful that the city got our starting salary up in July of this year. All right. We're still not where I would like us to be as far as a regional standard goes. But they did move the needle on that, right? So it did come up. But not everything is about pay. Not everything's about benefits. You are seeing vacancies in most departments in the Commonwealth, and I won't name them, but some departments that I'm closely affiliated with, when I talk to their chiefs who are friends of mine that I came up with, they're quoting me, almost 200 vacancies out of 750, 800 sworn officers. 70 vacancies out of 600 sworn officers. So pretty high levels of vacancies, and they're still trying to figure out how to get there. But one thing that I believe in is you have to be agile, And you're not going to hear me a lot of times hanging my hat on, well, we can't do this because of staffing. There are some things that you have to get smarter with, right? But I always think that we're going to be able to effectively respond to violent crime. That's game day for us. All right, when it comes to a homicide or a non-fatal shooting, you can believe if I have to reallocate resources to respond to said violent crime, we're going to do that. Okay, so I think there is more agility that's needed. And I'm not sure who gave you that about being. How did you phrase that again? I'm sorry.
42. So
Yeah, but what was it? What was after that? After the 42?
Well, what would you want to see that
Yeah.
be, I guess? Like,
Yeah, I mean, of course, I would love to have no vacancies, right? I would love for us to be 100%. And I mean, I see our classes are getting bigger. We're having double-digit folks attending our police academy, so I'm happy with that. And we have a pretty rigorous police academy, and it's very important to my folks, to our employees, our officers, our community, that we maintain, established standards. So we're not going to let that drop, and we are getting more folks in the door. But just the nature of policing has changed somewhat. So sometimes we have to reallocate resources as needed.
I have a question when it comes to accountability. I know that's a big word for you in your philosophy as a chief. I noticed this year, under your leadership, when it comes to officer-involved shootings, there have been 3 this year, I believe.
Yeah.
The officers involved have been named.
Yes.
And I would love to hear more about your policy on that, and how the officers, because at one point, you want to be transparent with the community. But
Yeah.
You want to have
Yeah.
the officers feel.
I knew you were going to get your chance to ask that. So, that is a policy that came with me from Danville. And that's a policy that when I walked in the door in Danville, there was a level of transparency and accountability that they had established for that community. And after an OIS, officer-involved shooting there, I really was like, wow, this is accepted, this is expected from our community. And that kind of became who I was as chief, right? You pick up different things in your journey, in your voyage. And we continue, Danville continues, and we continue here to believe that is important to message to our community, right? And one of my roles as a police chief is sometimes I have to pick, what is the maximum impact for the greatest good, right? So I think I have an extraordinary group of professionals here in the Roanoke Police Department. And 9 times out of 10, when I sit down with them and I tell them why I'm doing something, right? And you always need to explain the why, whether you're doing community walks or releasing names or going to de-escalation training, explain the why, right? A lot of times agencies fail because we don't explain the why. Well, we're just going to do it. Well, we're going to do it because I'm the chief, and right, you can get away with that for a little bit, but you want to explain the why. And I think when the why is we need to be transparent and accountable to our community, I think most of the time they understand that. And I want to keep my officers safe, and I want my officers to feel protected by their chief and by their agencies, but I also feel that we as public servants that wield a tremendous amount of authority. We have the authority to take someone's life and liberty away from them. That is tremendous. Think about that. I think that we have an obligation to be transparent to the general public. So when I weigh those two, transparency and accountability just kind of wins out. So I know it's not always super popular. I know that, especially when other jurisdictions maybe, kind of circle the wagons on that a little bit. But the only thing that I can do is go with what I think is right as a leader in policing, as a police chief, and I believe that that is the right thing for our community.
I have a follow-up question real quick.
Okay.
Historically, we've heard from the police department that the community is not willing to talk. They're not willing to go to police with information or share what they know. Have you noticed a difference with this accountability and transparency with the public?
Yeah, and that's always a work in progress, right? So I feel like we are getting better because we're solving cases. And, looking in the rearview mirror, when I look at what Danville had, right, before walking in the door there in 2018, we had abysmal clearance rates when it comes to a lot of things, but non-fatal shootings especially. And then if you look at their clearance rates right now, I think they just won a International Associations of Chiefs of Police award for their investigative unit. It's because they built a model that effectively responded to crime, but they also invested heavily in community engagement, which is also the playbook that we use here, right? We build that effective model to respond to crime, but we build that community engagement where people feel connected to us, and we are transparent and accountable so they know they can trust us. And there's so many things that go into that, right? You know, what we talk about, releasing information, connecting with folks in the community, making sure that, you know, when we do something wrong, that we're holding ourselves accountable. So it's a symbiotic relationship that you can never stop, right? Once you start it rolling, you have to be that type of organization. It has to stay with you. And I really forecast, as I look forward to how we're going to get better in 2025 and 2026 and finish out this year, I think as long as we keep investing in our community, we're going to see those clearance rates continue to go up, right? People are going to want to trust us more. When something happens, they're going to want to talk to us after an incident. So, you know, experience is a thing, and I have seen that in several communities now, and I don't think that Roanoke will disappoint me with that.
On the number of officer-involved shootings in the last year, do you have any theories about why that is compared to previous years?
Well, you know, I don't have the previous year's numbers in front of me, Henry, but I'll say it just like if I have a homicide or a non-fatal shooting, it's a tragedy whenever we use force, okay? Whenever we use deadly force in a community, it's a tragedy. This year, I believe we have one current OIS that has not been fully cleared yet. You know, we invite the Virginia State Police to do an unbiased investigation. But I will say that before I even speak to the media, I review all body-worn camera footage on said officer-involved shootings, and I have yet to see one that I didn't feel that fell in the category of justified. So, you know, when an officer feels threatened and have reasonable belief that their life or someone else is in jeopardy, they can use, under the constitutional standard, they can use deadly force. We have a city that has some challenges, and we have sometimes, many times, a lack of respect for the police. My first officer-involved shooting was in December of last year when we had an officer that was shot in the line of duty, right, trying to apprehend a homicide suspect, and then that suspect was shot by responding officers. So that was within 60 days as a new chief. I hate to say it, that's kind of a clear-cut officer-involved shooting, right, because we were fired upon and we returned fire. These others have all been, in my eyes, justified. I think sometimes we need to make sure we give officers some other tools. And that's why when I talk about de-escalation, all right, just because I can do it doesn't mean we don't have to have some other tools out there. Better tasers, all right, more enhanced ways of less lethal of taking suspects down without shooting them, and that de-escalation model. That's something that I saw once we put in place when I was down south as chief, that the number of OISs decreased, the number of use of forces actually decreased dramatically. And I think we're going to see the same thing here.
Can you comment on if you've seen an increase in mental health related calls and kind of how you've been addressing that or working with people to address it?
Yeah, don't have those numbers in front of me, so it's going to be anecdotal, which I really don't like anecdotal. But I will say this is something that the Roanoke Valley does really well, okay? And I don't want to say every officer-involved shooting, right, is about someone with mental challenges, although I think at least one that comes to mind, I think that played a part. But, you know, we have a co-responder model where we have clinicians from Blue Ridge Behavioral Health out there with us. And I actually got to do a panel when I was in Boston last week with the International Associations of Chiefs of Police, and it was me and a retired Roanoke County chief, and they were talking about the research they did in 2022 on that model. And I remember one of the things that at the end of the research that George Mason University presented was that you know, there was some resistance. And we talk about the culture of an organization just because it was new at the time. I think the Roanoke Police Department, as well as other police agencies in the Valley, have fully embraced that now. And I think that having a clinician out there with you, having a mental health worker is invaluable as you deal with somebody that's going through crisis. For the longest, when I was coming up in policing, you know, the standard was crisis intervention team, CIT training, which is 40 hours of training. That became kind of the standard. But you know, that standard, it needed to evolve. You needed more than just officer training. You also needed clinicians. So I think the fact that we have that in the Valley is a great thing. So we're seeing that have a positive impact as well.
You attribute the community policing and stratified policing to the drop in shootings and fatal and non-fatal loss?
So stratified as far as how you're looking at the data. And what we saw when I was down in Danville, right, everything was like, oh, violence has gone down because of community policing. I would hear that a lot. Everything works hand in hand, right? So it's a symbiotic relationship. So community policing, good community policing, getting out and building relationships, that helps with, hey, folks are talking to the police more, right? That's a good thing. They're feeling they trust the police more, they're more comfortable with the police, that's a good thing. But you also have to have that really strong data-driven model, and that's where the stratified policing comes in. That's where making sure you have the right resources early on in an investigation, right? Things like ballistic imaging, so you're looking at shell cases early on, matching crime guns to each other. You have to have all that. So the community policing gives you a strong foundation for how you communicate and how the public trusts you and views your agency as legitimate. But you really have to have the strong investigative techniques and strong resource allocation working in conjunction with that. So it's always the two things working together, all right? It's always a strong emphasis on crime reduction through focused policing and the relationship building that community policing gives you. So it's really both of them working together.
If it's a fact that these things work and reduce crime, why do you think that, ballistics imaging, community policing weren't implemented beforehand?
I don't know what to tell you. That's what I believe in, right? And it's a laundry list of things that I feel that work in cities, in different communities. And, we could offer, why aren't they doing it in other communities too, right? I think that you have to have a community that demands accountability. I think you have to have a police department, organization that wants more, wants to be better. I always feel like we have a level of drive here in Roanoke, and I certainly don't want to take credit for all that, but I will tell you this: I am never satisfied unless I feel like we're having an impact. All right, like I told you, I'm kind of a one-trick pony with that. I want us to really move the needle on violence in our community. I want us to move the needle on crime in our community. I want us to have an impact, a positive impact on crime in our community, as well as I want those levels of trust to increase. So to me, that metric is, crime going down and folks really appreciating and trusting their police department going up. All right, those are two very important metrics for me. The trust one's a little bit harder. You can look at your clearance rates and say that's a somewhat, I guess, tangible results on if folks are talking to the police, but sometimes it's a little bit deeper than that. And sometimes that's a hard one, right? You have to keep working with trust, because something, one bad police use of force, one bad incident can really erase so many things that a department has done positively in a community. So, yeah. So, I don't know. That's what we do here. We're going to continue to do here. We're going to continue to refine the things that are working here, and we're going to evolve. We're going to work out and build out a real-time crime center. That's already in the works. All right. I'm very excited about that. More to follow. Once we get that up and running, we're going to make sure you guys are invited to that. I think that's going to be great for our community. That will allow us to really kind of see crime early on, crime incidents as they happen, and make sure resources are deployed appropriately. So that's like the big thing that I have on my mind right now.
Is that crime center the black glass that we see being put up down the road here?
No.
No. Oh.
Good try, though. Maybe that's a CIA hotspot or something. I don't know what that is.
Okay. It was on the bottom of the jail.
Not the jail. Come on, man.
Okay.
You tried, though. Go down there and tell Sheriff, hey, I sent you down there to check that out. Crawl in the window. I'm joking. All right.
But so do you attribute the department's work to the decrease in?
Oh, Henry, why are you trying so hard to get me to say something?
No, I'm just.
I think it's, but Henry, I think it's everything. What do you want me to say? That we don't have any impact when it comes to crime? You guys are going to blame me when it's bad. So why, right? Are you not? You are, kind of, sort of. I think that it's the department working with other organizations in the community. I think focused policing works to reduce crime. I think that would be, for me to say that it doesn't would literally be me not believing in something I believed in for decades at this point. Good policing matters. All right, I saw the homicide rate when I started in Richmond was 160 in 1994. In 2008, it was 32. All right, there was something that was happening in Richmond at the time. Now it's gone back up. All right, but there was something that was happening at that time in that community, right? And a part of that was accountability and good policing. And part of it was people that trusted their police more. And I think you're seeing some of those things here. I'll never say that it's all policing, right? Just like I wouldn't expect, folks to say that it was all social services or it's all development, or gentrification. None of it, it's things that kind of work together. But policing is a part of that, right? So I think policing working within existing models that maybe aren't speaking, aren't communicating, aren't operating as well together can have a tremendous impact. I do believe that. All right?
One more question.
All right.
There's been a lot of turnover and change with leadership and within the police department. So the two-part question is, how long do you plan to stay in Roanoke? And why should the community trust you to make their community safer?
So how long am I staying? I've been here a year. I'm not planning on going anywhere. Yeah, I think, look, I was born in Roanoke, right? So I consider myself, whether they consider me or not, I'm a Roanoker, right? So I might have only been here for a year. It took me 50 years to get back. This is a great community. All right, so as far as why they should trust me, I like to feel like working together with the community, we're having some very positive results. And I think we have a great team, and I think we're going to continue to build out on that team. I feel really good about what our leadership is doing, what our officers are doing here in the Roanoke Police Department. Like I said, I'm in no hurry, nor do I have any plans to go anywhere. This is really a great community. For the longest, I always looked at, I even remember being in Richmond years ago, and I really haven't shared this with anybody, but I remember being in Richmond years ago as a senior leader, as a major, and telling folks, I was like, wouldn't it be really cool to be like the chief of like Roanoke, Virginia or something? So it's self-actualized. Here I am. Why would I want to go anywhere? Did I answer your question? Yeah, good. All right, y'all. We good?
5 or 6 questions.
Why do you wait till the end?
I'd rather do a one-on-one, but if you want me to throw them at you.
All right, let's do a one-on-one. Me and you. All right. One-on-one. Good.
Thanks.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right, thank y'all. Gosh, Henry has the hardest questions though. Why don't you guys exclude Henry out of the next press conference? He only comes around once a year and he saves every question he can think of. Well, according to CPSM document,
Hey, they do
page
break a lot of
113,
news.
huh?
Yep, they break a lot of news on,
I know. The Rambler, man.
Hey, did you have mine? Yeah.
Yeah, man. You good? Don't make it look too bad. Yes, ma'am.